We likely all know somebody that has experienced domestic abuse, or maybe we've had our own domestic abuse situation. And domestic abuse comes in many flavors and colors. So today we're going to have a mashup of three of our guests who were willing to share their story and just to see the differences and how we can all live brighter 1% at a time. Make it a great day. Hi, Erica.
Hi there, Tara. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us in Live Brighter with Tara. And I look forward to having this interview with you and you sharing your story.
Yes, I'm excited.
Okay, let's just start with a little bit about yourself, like where you were, how many kids you have, a little bit about your family background.
Yeah, so I have three kids, two boys, one girl. I have pets, which I love as well, just like
Just
kids.
say it because we can see your pet in the background. You can, and it's not just a pet, so you got to explain what type of pet you have.
Oh, yeah, I love exotic cats or anything. Yeah, so I have Bengals and then Savannah, and they are just, gosh, they're my passion in life. Um, yeah, you'll probably see him.
Yes, I
He's
can.
Teddy. He's like, but yeah, pets and where I work at Macy's right now, but my ultimate goal is to be a spiritual life coach to help others heal themselves or if they need to get out back on track with their life to help them.
Wonderful. And that really goes into kind of your background too and what you've experienced. So,
Yeah.
just a little context, Erica and I met actually, gosh, I don't even know how long ago. And I met Erica's ex-husband first in real estate and then got to know Erica and we became very, very good friends. And it was just a God thing how everything happened and how we were just such good friends. So now we're going to get right into your story, Erica. So you've definitely had some domestic abuse challenges. So why don't you tell them a little bit about your story?
Gosh, I want to say like the first thing is that like everything seemed great at first. Like it never is right away. It's always a slow process of the abuse or emotional abuse because it wasn't really physical, it was more emotional and mental, like not good for the mind. Um, and so it happened very slowly. We got married, and I would say it really kicked in after we had our son Kane, who's 7 now. He became very, I don't even know why it all happened, but it's like something clicked in his mind and he got very possessive over Kane and I wasn't doing anything right. And we actually had an altercation a couple of times right after I had Kane. And it just, gosh, that was when it really kind of started. And then he went away for work. And then I wanted to live in Montana and he wasn't really sure if he wanted to. And, but I kind of pushed it. And so we sold our house in Fargo and then we moved here. And that's when I started to see everything what was going on with him. And that's when it really kicked into gear with the drugs and I mean, it was wild. Like nothing I've ever experienced before.
Because
You
it was almost like a light switch, like, and then all of a sudden, just a huge transition with how he talked to you, the altercations, the conflict, and just how he would yell at you. Very, and it ended up spiraling big time.
yes, it was very, oh my God. I mean, the cops were involved in our life. And as soon as me and the kids moved to Bozeman, he was drinking, I noticed like quite a bit. And I had a feeling maybe he was dipping into drugs. Um, but even the name calling, like he would name call me like I mean, do you care if I
I
say,
actually want you to because it gives context,
yes,
as far as like what it was like for you.
yes, like very degrading that I was a whore. I was a skate. I mean, I was old looking. I didn't look good for him. Like, and he would get in my face and like, he was so upset. He would literally be screaming in my face where spit was coming out of his mouth. I mean, it was like listening to a demon almost. That's the best way I can explain it because I don't even understand how he could be this really nice guy and like would do anything or he portrayed that he would do anything for us. And he was actually really good to the kids. It was all between me and him, but he would do all this in front of the kids too. So, I mean, it's kind of like this battle of, um, was he, because I mean, the older two kind of remember it and they knew it wasn't right. And they were scared at the time because he was out of control and yelling. And yeah, I mean, the name calling was absurd. That was like the worst thing. And he'd call me a dog and go sit in the corner like a dog. And it was just, it's hard to even comprehend how he, that's what's going through his mind, obviously, because usually it comes out in one way or another, right? So, yeah, so then we got
it climaxed. So
well,
then it climaxed to an incident. So tell him about that incident.
yeah, so then he got into the drugs very deep, and I filed for divorce, and that's when he really started. I mean, it was off the rocker craziness. He tried to commit suicide, but he wasn't successful with it.
And he actually shot himself, right, with the suicide. Like he actually shot himself and he missed his heart. Like just to put this in context.
Yes. And then he tried it again, like a month later after he failed the first time. And so, yeah, he tried it again. And I put a restraining order on him because he was very, very dangerous. Like our safety was at play at this point, especially when he had nothing to live for anymore. And he made that very clear because he lost everything. And so the thing is, gosh, sure, I almost have to remember how this all went when he showed up at the house. So after about 6 months of back and forth between me and him, he was officially out of the house because he couldn't be around me and the kids because he was just out of his mind. And he got into the drugs very deep. He told me how deep he was into it. And he had went down to Vegas and he pretty much lost his mind down there. I don't even know what happened down there. I don't really know what was all going on besides nothing good. It was all drug related. And he had called me about over 120 times, and he said he was making a lot of threats to me that he was going to show up at the house if I didn't answer. And during this time, he was attacking Tara, and he was attacking people. He was making up stuff in his mind that I was dating some other people, that Tara was trying to hook me up, and which wasn't true.
Yeah, so he actually shot one of my real estate signs, and I was getting these weird harassing things, and we didn't know it was Josh at the time. It was just so bizarre. And then one night he like called me, and probably called me 100 times, and got onto my Facebook and started calling my friends on Facebook and clients that he thought that I'd set her up with, which was completely made up. There was none of that going on. I had to get a restraining order as well. And I was not even living at my house. It got so dangerous where Eric and I actually, it was summertime and we actually lived in a friend's camper for a little bit because it seems very, very dangerous at that time. And then there was the last evening, which was like a total miracle that it ended up the way it did because it could have ended very differently.
Yeah. So we were staying at her friend's camper and I decided to go home with the kids that night because we didn't really hear from him. Well, as soon as I got home, he had sent me an email saying like, your friend just put a restraining order on me. I just got served papers. Like, I'm coming out to this isn't good, Erica. And I'm coming out to take care of things. And then he had presented a photo to me through the email, which I didn't really know what it was at the time because there's like a remote and something next to it. And after this all happened, the cop determined that it was like a barrel of a gun. But he situated it so I couldn't really tell what it was, but the cop knew what it was. So he showed up at the house and he was out of his mind. He was screaming, making a scene in our neighborhood. And we lived in a very nice neighborhood, very quiet, very nice. And he was screaming on the top of his lungs. And good thing the cops were all, because I had called the cops that he was on his way out. And they were all waiting for him at the house when he showed up. And good thing they were, because one of the cops was on the side of the house because they knew he was going to break a window. Sorry, the kitties. He was going to break a window, and we had doors our door had windows in it as well. So they weren't sure what he was going to do, but he was full of rage. And so he was about ready. When he approached the door, the cop said he was about ready to like bust in the door or break a window, and the cop like came around the corner and said, Josh. And that's when he lost it. He was just out of control, screaming, and they couldn't really get him to calm down. And like 20 minutes of talking him down. And then the whole time, he wanted to talk to me. He wanted to see me. And the cops were like, you can't be here. You can't see her. She doesn't want to see you. And he wouldn't take no for an answer. And all along, while my kids could hear him outside. So it was very traumatic for them because they didn't know what was going on with Dad and why he was acting like this. So by the end of the night, they finally got him to calm down. I mean, he was crying. He was on the ground. He was up. He was screaming. Then he would calm down. Finally, they got his friend to come because he said he wanted to go home, but he said he would be back around 4 in the morning to take care of things. So the time him and his friend left, his friend came there, picked him up, they left. The cop was like, you cannot be here. He will be back. Like, he made it very clear he's going to be back at any time, but maybe around 4 in the morning. And they're like, you have to leave this house because we know his intentions. They're not good. Like, he has nothing to live for right now. So yeah, I had my friend come out and she helped me kind of pack up the kids, pack up the cats, and we left, which was, this was like 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was just when you're in that state of mind, it's like a fight or flight mode. Like, you just know you have to get out of there because he's going to do something that's out of your control because he was like in a mania, I would say. And, and the whole time so me and the kids got to my friend's house and we stayed there. Gosh, I don't even remember, maybe like 3 or 4 days. Was it 2? I feel like. And then he was emailing me the entire time, and because I had him blocked on my phone, but he was telling me what he was going to do. And he told me gosh, I can't even recall everything that he was saying, but he had showed up at the house on Monday. So this incident was Saturday. So he shows up on the house on Monday and he's telling me he's going to, blow his brains out. And he wanted me and him, because he was like, where are you? Are you at the house? So he's tricking me that he wanted to talk to me. He wanted to sort things out, but I wasn't even there. So he did show up at the house and he was saying he was going to kill himself and do whatever he was going to do at that time. And then he realized I wasn't at the house. So then he had court that day from what happened on Saturday night. Well, then Monday, when he went to court, he actually got arrested because he wasn't supposed to have any contact with me.
And not only that, because that was just so scary because everyone knew he was dangerous, but trying to get him in jail and you safe was very, very challenging. So it was actually, he tried to get a weapon and he lied on his weapon application. And that is actually how he ended up getting arrested for that. Is that correct, Erica? That was the thing that kept him in jail?
Yeah. And plus, like, we had a no contact order between me and him showing up at the house and like threatening me and sending all this stuff through email and calling me 120 times that night and threatening other people. That's what got him arrested.
I see.
But then it followed with the federal was coming after him as well, because with the restraining order, he was trying to buy a gun. Mm-hmm. And it kind of correlated when he was trying to get this gun, it correlated because me and him were in very high tension during the time when he was trying to get this gun. So it all kind of lined up with his intentions.
Yeah. So it could have ended with a very different scenario. And thankfully he's been in jail. So yeah. Wow. How did the situation affect you mentally, physically, all of that? And how about your children?
Gosh, I look back and yeah, I mean, whenever you're under a lot of distress in your life, I mean, it comes out in different ways. And it was so stressful. And shortly after, because I couldn't even believe the person that you married and loved, and you're seeing him go through this extreme, I don't even know, extreme life challenge on drugs. It's very hard to accept. And I felt very shameful of even what happened. Gosh, I've learned a lot about if you're not in a healthy relationship, it literally affects mentally, physically, emotionally. And then I decided what can I do to heal myself? What can I do to get me and the kids on track? And that's when I started my healing process and really talking to the kids and letting them process. And, they went through their own way of how they dealt with it, whether it was I feel like my oldest son was angry at him because that's dad. And now look at, he wasn't a role model to Tayson. And Kane has so much love for dad. He's like, where's daddy? Like, is he coming back? I hope dad's okay. And then Lexa, she's just hoping he gets better. So with me talking to them a lot, I feel like they just we've learned the art of forgiveness and working through how can we become better and still holding up us praying for him that he sees the light and works out his own mental mess. So yeah, that's
yeah, I have to say, just watching you through all of this, Erica, who would have guessed, our friendship that started with me meeting Josh, would go through all of that. And just to see how you have dealt with it has really been amazing, because you really chose a high vibe, a learning, like really immersed yourself in the healing and understanding all of that. And I just thought that was amazing. Do you have some more things like how did you learn to thrive after the situation and what you learned from the situation?
Yeah, what I've learned is you really need to trust yourself. Like like even in our marriage, I was very headstrong. I just didn't let him walk all over me, and that's why it was a toxic relationship because I would stand up for myself. I mean, I'm like, you're not going to call me a whore. You're not going to say I'm trash. You're not going to say I'm this. Like stand up for myself. And he did not like that. That's where we butted heads. And then when I started changing how I did things, because that's what he wanted. He wanted a reaction. He wanted me to get mad. And it was just like fighting. I mean, our fights were sometimes a couple hours at a time and just intense yelling, like craziness. And I just couldn't even barely do it anymore. I was just tired. When you're fighting, like you're just wasting energy and energy that is not healthy for you. And so I decided, like, let him yell, let him have his fit. And I'm just going to sit there and take it. Like, because I didn't really, like, I know I'm not a whore. I know I'm not trashy. I know I'm not, so I won't even say everything he said, but I knew I wasn't those things. So it didn't affect me like how he wanted it to, even though I wanted to fight back with him. That was my main goal, is to get out of it, to get me and the kids out of it safe. And it really goes back to your mindset. Mindset is everything. And all the wisdom and knowledge that I got from that relationship has helped me grow into who I want to be and staying in a high vibration. Like he was I talk a lot about frequency and that's kind of when I started to learn like what kind of person he was. Like he's a very low vibe person, even though we had a lot of fun, but his frequency was up and down. Like he'd be yelling and calling names, but then he could go way up into like a loving vibration. So I've really learned about like who I want to be even more.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, that's been really neat because I've seen you in action as far as how you talk to friends or hurting people. And there's just an awareness of what they're really going through and a kind of a cut through the BS with like love and compassion, but clarity. And so I'm super excited about your coaching business and how you're going to help people. And, just through the experience you've been through, it's amazing, like thinking back how much you've grown through that. And how like your kids are all emotionally very healthy and mentally very healthy, and how you created a space for them to be able to process all of that. So I just think it's really amazing. Like I would have never guessed, that, Eric and I's friendship, that because Josh was very normal when we first met, never would have guessed that it was a life-threatening situation that could have led to your demise. And so I'm just super, super grateful. And I'm amazed at how you're going to impact the world because of it.
Yes, with your help too, Tara, because we kind of went through it together, and then like something so traumatic ended up being something so, like a blessing in disguise. And that's how you have to look at it. Like some people might hold anger towards, I went through anger with him. And then the ultimate level of love, I would say, is forgiveness. And, do I still think about him? Yeah, he comes to my mind. You know what I mean? Like I still have care for him because I don't want him. You hear a lot of people complain about their exes or this or that, and it's like, where is that going to? You're going to attract more of that. So I believe in like the manifestation, like be who you want to be, and that's what you're going to attract.
That's a great place to leave us. Be who you want to be, and that is what you're going to attract. That's awesome, yeah. Erica. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you, Tara.
Our emotional cups can get full without us really even being aware of it. But when our emotional cups get full, we can react rather than respond. We can be fatigued. We can feel burdened. We have struggle with sleep. We can have physical symptoms. And that's why I have the free Barf Notebook page for you. And it's a simple process done regularly where you're barfing out your thoughts, sorting them out, and planning them out. And it's a wealth of healing in that. So go ahead and check the link and have access to that free Barf Notebook process. Live brighter every day. So today, though, we're going to talk to a guest. Michael Schaan happens to be my husband. What? And I think he's going to have some great things to share with us. So, Michael, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I come from a very large family of 10 children. I was raised on a ranch in Eastern Oregon, and I have one son, Joseph. And so after marrying Tara, now we have a big tribe, and we're having a lot of fun.
Yes, we are. So, Michael, let's talk about your story. How long were you married again?
I was married for 16 years
to
my ex-wife, and we had a relationship for 2 years before that. So it's an 18-year marriage. And
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about that as far as, it was destructive in its own way. So why don't you share a little bit about your story in that sense?
Yeah, I think so. When we both got married, we were both not ready to be married. We were both unhealthy, unhappy, and were drawn to each other. Initially, the marriage started out okay, but the latter years were very unhappy. I felt a lot of really disrespect. I wasn't really seen when we would argue, like every marriage does. My ex-wife was very good with name calling and beratement, and since I was back then very much of a pleaser, I would take everything and I would just stuff it inside, and I wouldn't really fight back or really stand up for myself.
Yeah. So I think for the audience to understand what beratement, it can look like a lot of different things. But I do think an example would be useful of the kind of names or the kind of things that were told to you regularly. My
ex-wife would call me, an effing loser. I felt very emasculated around her. She was always looking for the big, strong, tough guy. And I can be big and strong, but on the inside, I'm really gentle. And that just wasn't really what she was looking for in her life, I don't think.
Yeah. So there were just regular conversations and disagreements, and the disagreements would end up with a lot of name calling. So I'm sure that didn't feel well. How did that affect you mentally and physically as far as and also your part as far as buffering?
Well, it really, after years of this, I think the tendency is for you to start believing it, whether it's true or not. And the way that it impacted me the most was it really shook my self-confidence.
Right. And on your side, I know when we're going through these challenging times, we find ways to soothe ourselves, to cope. How did you use to soothe yourself or cope during these challenging times?
So I kind of went inside of myself. I became quiet and docile in our relationship. I stopped drinking. I don't think I was drinking too much, but I felt the front edge of what could be a drinking problem. And so stopped. So I did turn to alcohol for a little bit, but then stopped that altogether. I just was not taking care of myself at all. It was just very, very sad part of my life.
So what was your relationship with work, and how did that help soothe you?
Well, starting a new company, it takes a lot of time. And so all of my free time, other than spending time with my son, was put towards working. It was very common for me to wake up at 4:30 every day, be in the office around 5 or 5:15, and I would work all day long and go do field inspections, and then come home, maybe around 4 or 5 in the evening. I would go to my office at my home, and I would start writing reports and working, and then one of my kids would come down and say, "Dad, Mom says it's time for dinner." And so I would go up and have dinner, and then go back to the office and finish up some reports and whatnot. And I did that lifestyle for years. And it ended up being a wedge between us because her impression was that, I was working all the time, and so that's why we weren't talking, when in fact my position is that instead of getting yelled at and degraded all the time, I would rather go bury myself in work.
Right. So probably a little bit of using work to buffer a little bit, but also a busy startup company.
Of course.
It sounds like you had challenges for a while. Why did you stay so long? What sort of beliefs? What was your thinking as far as that?
Yes, very simply, I was raised Catholic, and divorce is a sin. And so that spiritual component of it, and I'm very spiritual now, I love God and love Jesus. And the way that I was raised was that, divorce was a big sin. And so you did what you had to do to grind it out and stay divorced. To stay married. And if there were times, ups and downs in a typical marriage, you just stuck it out. And so that's what I did. And I know at the end of our marriage, when we were doing counseling, I would still be going to counseling now, trying to save it. And until she filed divorce papers on me, I was really in it, which is so strange because I was so unhappy. And after doing my recovery, as I call it, it's kind of funny now because I was really trying to save something that I was so unhappy with.
How did you learn? What was your recovery like? How did you learn to thrive after that situation?
Yes. When she filed divorce papers on me, I had already moved out from our home and I was living in an apartment for about 6 months. And then she filed divorce papers, and we went through our divorce. Fortunately, it was fairly amicable. We didn't get lawyers or anything like that. We used a mediator because even though we were divorcing, we could still speak to each other civilly. And I stayed in my apartment, and so I had about a year by myself. And it was a very, initially very sad 6 months, the first 6 months, because I was trying to figure out why I had been such a poor husband to the point where I had caused us to become divorced, and, really why I had failed being a good husband. And so it was a very eye-opening experience, but through constant prayer, much meditation every day. I was still working a lot, but I really took the time to stop and really start looking deeply within myself. And what I recognized was that I was a good person, I was a strong person, and I was really getting beat up a lot when I had very, very poor boundaries. I was letting somebody tell me who I was, and if I didn't believe it, I was getting beaten up for it, and to the point where I started to believe it. So the first 6 months was very introspective, very hard, a lot of crying, a lot of questioning about who I was as a person and as a man and as a husband. And then the second 6 months, I started to come out of the dive, and it was such a gloriously hard, sad, fun experience, because I had realized that I'm a good person, I'm a good, strong man, I'm a great father, and I was putting boundaries in. I was getting boundaries now where I was telling myself, okay, this is long-winded, but okay. Initially I was a confirmed bachelor. I had accepted that I would rather be happy and alone for the rest of my life rather than in a relationship and unhappy. And once I realized that the rest of my life, I was going to live my life, and I was going to be happy, and I was going to be a wonderful dad. And if someone wanted to join me in that life, fantastic. If not, fantastic. Either way, I was going to be happy. And once I realized that, and again, a lot with God's grace and strength, once I realized that, that's where I started to climb back up out of the hole.
Really good. So what else have you learned from the situation? Because it's been a while and you can look back and now you're married and all of that.
Yeah. So. Really, our happiness cannot start with anyone else. Our happiness has to start with us.
Amen.
We have to be happy. We have to be healthy. Because when you find such a magnificent person like you, and when we met, we had both what we had done our recovery.
Done our work, yes.
Yep, we had done our work. And we were in such a good position. We were so happy and thriving that everything now in the relationship it's just so much fun. We love each other dearly. We do our daily devotion. God is the third person in our relationship.
Yes.
But now after doing all of this hard work, we're thriving together, and I've just never been happier in my life because I have found the person that is my equal, is my teammate, is my love. She's my greatest cheerleader. We talk about everything and anything, which is super important, to be honest, all the way honest. Don't hold anything back. And if you find the right person who receives that information and doesn't judge you because of it, simply loves you and understands it, because no one has had a perfect life, that's how we're really thriving.
Barry, thanks for sharing all of that.
You're welcome.
And you're living brighter regularly, and yes. I get the advantage of you're living brighter with me. We have a wonderful marriage, and I'm very grateful for our friendship and the equality and the love and respect that we share.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing about your background and what you went through, and I think that's very helpful.
You're welcome.
Are you a chronic people pleaser? Do you overgive, overfunction, pretty kind, and you're just tired, or maybe even a little bit resentful? Or are you wondering, wow, is this all to life? Is this how it works? Because I kind of feel like I'm going through the motions. Well, that's what the Unravel Notebook is for. It's 61 days to unravel our thinking, beliefs, and live a life intentionally as we connect closer with God, ourselves, and others, so we can be more confident and live brighter in this world. So, hi, Jules. Thanks for joining us today with Live Brighter with Tara. How are you?
I am so happy to be here. So excited to see you and so excited to be here. I've never been on a podcast before.
You got your own podcast.
Besides my
we'll
own,
be
I
talking
guess.
about that. So that'll be fabulous. Okay, well, let's start with, this is all about living brighter after domestic abuse, emotional destructiveness, and really just living brighter. And a lot of that comes from like just healing ourselves and, our 50% of the challenge and all of that. But to give some background, first tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I live in Colorado. I grew up in South Dakota and moved here in 2008. Grew up in, I love Colorado. I have 3 kids. They are ages 24, 21, and 17. And yeah, what do I do? I'm real estate. I have real estate investments. I also have a podcast. Can I say it?
Oh, absolutely.
I also have a podcast called Show the Fuck Up. That's all about like building self-awareness to live your best life. And yeah, that's kind of the quick.
Woohoo! Okay, Jules, how long were you married?
I was married for 19 years. We were together for 24 years.
Okay. And it definitely had destructiveness and some very interesting, challenging things. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would say what I felt like in my marriage was that there was really never an emotional connection. And he was like my first real relationship. So I think I just felt like that was just the way it was. And I grew up also very religious, if I may say. And so to me, I was just like, you get married, you're married. This is what happens. You just push yourself through and you make things work out. And I also feel like one of the dynamics I brought into it was I had a dad that was like very volatile, not like physically to me, but I like watched him be rageful. And so it made me become like, don't rock the boat. So I took my childhood stuff into my marriage, which was fully my part. And I never fought, never wanted to fight, never wanted to argue, never wanted to speak my wants, needs. I don't even know if I knew them because I was so focused on everyone else. So I feel like I put everyone else before me. I thought they were more important. Their needs were more important. My self-esteem was about 0. I had no self-esteem. So I felt just lucky to be with him. Like, oh, lucky me. Like he wants me. I'm chosen. It's funny now, but it's really not funny at the time. I mean, to look back on now, I just have to kind of laugh, but it was like a very sad place to be for so many years. Yeah. So I think the dynamic I brought into it was that. And then it was kind of more like kind of felt like I was more like a mother, kind of taking care of, by the end, I felt like it was like me and 4 kids instead of like a relationship, a partnership where we're working together to make things happen. And
there's also the financial challenges as far as what he chose to do and the porn. So I think bringing that in gives a clearer perspective of what you were dealing with.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So he just quit working and decided I'm not going to work and was kind of like trying or talking about getting a job, but that happened for quite a while. And then I think I think I could feel like something was going on, but nothing like had well, he wasn't working. So that was a big thing that wasn't okay for me. And I could just feel like something was really wrong, but I was trying to blame it on myself. I was like, what's wrong with me? What happened to me? Like, what's going on? And then found out after I had asked him to leave, found out that he was into porn. Like, I feel like it kind of just made him really, really check out, even though we didn't really have a deep emotional connection anyway. But whenever that happened, it just was like, kind of like he was gone.
So how did the situation affect you mentally, physically, and then buffering or anything like that?
Well, I feel like for so long, I felt because of my low self-esteem, I feel like I was always trying to like give and do. And what can I do to be worthy? What can I do to make him love me? What can I do to be accepted? I think all of those things are kind of what I was driven by for so long, at the expense of totally abandoning myself, like completely abandoning my wants and needs and desires and whatever I wanted. So keeping the focus. Well, and honestly, I feel like one of the things I did that is completely on me is like, I kind of made him my God in a way. That sounds super extreme, But I feel like since then, like God's given me this view of like, I'm first, like I'm first. And so I feel like that's been something I've really um become aware of after the fact, that that was like a choice I made that I need to change in my life moving forward.
Yeah, I completely did that too. Just elevated and training in the past and roles and all of those things. I really did elevate him above God. So
I
that
hate
was,
to even admit that. It's just like, ugh, that's terrible. But it was what it was.
yep. So what did you learn from the situation? Like, what have you learned?
What have I learned from the situation? Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Life
so
full of
much.
lessons. I learned that the way I related in my marriage with him was kind of like the way I related with my dad. So it was already set up to be like a very dysfunctional relationship because I didn't know how to fight. I was afraid to speak up and say what I wanted, say what I needed, put myself not even first, but even on any one of the burners to matter at all. I think I learned that like my self-esteem is my responsibility, like getting myself to where I want to be. I think that's why I've been divorced 7 years, and I feel like I've spent 7 years working on myself. Like, how do I heal my heart, and how do I build myself up, and how do I learn to be in relationship and speak my wants, needs, and desires, and not be worried about rocking the boat, because I'm learning how to fight. Like there really is something to being able, whether we call it fighting or discussing or whatever it is, like that is so important in a relationship. What else have I learned? Give me a second. There's like books of stuff I've learned. So
What was one of the things, Jules, because you've done so much work to just be at this healthier state and understand how your childhood played into it and really just do a lot of healing for yourself. What are some of the ways you did that?
Well, I think one big thing for me was journaling. So like actually journaling and allowing myself to like write down, what are my dreams? What are my hopes? What are my wants? What are my desires? And how, like, allowing myself to put those things out there for me. And it's like been the beginning of creating this life that don't think I thought I could ever have. And also I've done a lot of coaching, like therapy, coaching with, been coached and had therapy. And I think the biggest thing that has helped me has been calling out like my faulty beliefs, like the old beliefs I had about life, about myself, about relationships, about marriage, about religion, roles in relationships, like all of those things. I had all of these old beliefs that I was just so tied to, that I feel like it's just been like one by one by one by one, taking those beliefs and asking myself, is this working for me now or not? Things that I felt so deeply, like this is truth. This is truth. I'm like, is it really truth? That's what coaching has taught me. Is it really truth, or is it just this thought I have in my head? And then kind of calling those things out and then working on replacing those with like, but what do I want now? What do I want to believe in this situation now? And I remember when I first heard that in coaching, when they said, you're like, our thoughts aren't always the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I think I believe, like, yes, they are. Like, what are you talking about? Whatever these beliefs I have, like, these are true. Well, they're not. They're things we've learned and we've picked up through our like generational things, through our parents, through religion. And so I think calling all of those things out and changing them over to truths for me. So I think this whole journey has been like a journey of truth, like coming back to my truth. And what is, I guess a big part of it too is like, who does God say I am? And who do I believe I am? And just changing all of those things into the truth. I really believed those old ones were truth, but they weren't. So just coming back to myself, coming back home to myself, I think putting God back in that first spot in my life, and then living from that place for me has been like becoming like my authentic self, like who I was created to be. And I look back at who I was and I'm just so sad. Like I feel sad for the girl that I was. And I'm also grateful, I guess, for all of the lessons that I learned from what that younger me had to go through.
How are you living brighter? I know you've learned so much, you've done so much. There's a couple exciting things going on in your life with a dream that is making this dream happen. And then also in a way that you give and try to help others. So go ahead and talk about those two things.
So I would say the dream that is happening is I'm purchasing a vacation rental property in Grand Lake, Colorado, which I've had this dream for years and years to have a place that I can do retreats. And also Grand Lake is just a place that's so special in my heart because when my kids were younger, we used to go up there a lot in the summers on the weekends. And the interesting thing though, I want to share too, is that I feel like it was just like the vision I had of this was that God was holding this crown in front of me and he was like, this is for you if you can receive it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so scared. I can't. For weeks, I was too scared. And he was like, when you're ready, you can receive it. This is my gift for you. Just like, I feel like it was like, submit yourself to God and he will give you the desires of your heart. I feel like it was that kind of a thing. And the interesting thing is it's always been easy for me to give, but to receive has been like the big struggle. So I feel like, and what it was for me really was getting more of those beliefs. Like, who do you think you are? You can't do this. You can't make this happen. So it was like overcoming more of those beliefs and the fears. So I finally was able to say, okay, I'm going to take this crown. And now I feel like I don't even really have that many words because it's happening as we speak. Like next week I close on it and I know it's just the beginning of like this whole new chapter. One time before my divorce started, but when things weren't the best, God gave me these words, your life is going to go from black and white to color. And way back then, I remember thinking, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I can truly say it is like beyond what I could have ever dreamed or imagined for it to be. And then I feel like what my giving back is, so I started the podcast really just to share the things that I've learned with coaching and how that completely changed my life. And I feel like fortunate that I was able to have coaches and I was able to invest in myself and have therapists and learn all these things. And I just feel so blessed that I just wanted to like share the information that I had that helped me change my life. So I feel like I'm doing that with the podcast and being able to help other people change their lives. Because I feel like that's my purpose. I feel like that's my purpose in life is to help other people to have the kind of transformation that I've had. Because I feel so much gratitude and so blessed at where I am right now.
Absolutely. I love it. So everyone, there'll be a link to Jules' podcast below and you'll enjoy it as much as I have. And thank you so much for being here, Jules, and sharing your story and talking with all of us.
Thank you for having me here.
Stay tuned for our next episode.